The headline on the Crestwood Academy bulletin board said it all. Rothschild Amelia failed again. Gasps and laughter rippled through the crowd of students. The daughter of one of the richest men in America failing every single test. It sounded impossible, yet there it was, in black and red ink. She pushed past the whispers, her face burning. No amount of money, no private tutors, no elite teachers had been able to save her. Amelia Rothschild, billionaire's daughter, heiress to a vast empire, couldn't pass a single subject. And while her classmates mocked her, Amelia's mind raced with one terrifying thought. What would her father say this time? That night, her despair carried her through the long empty halls of the estate. She wanted to be alone, away from everyone, but instead, she stumbled on someone she had never truly noticed before. Elijah Carter, the janitor. His hands rough, his uniform faded, yet his eyes carried a quiet strength she'd never seen in any of her tutors. He looked up from polishing the floor and said softly, "Grades don't decide your worth, Amelia, but I can teach you something money will never buy." At that moment, she had no idea those words, spoken by the school's janitor, would change the course of her life forever. If you were in Amelia's shoes, rich beyond imagination but failing at the one thing the world expected of you, how would you handle it? Would you hide, fight, or give up? Share your thoughts below. For most kids, failing a test meant a lecture at home, or maybe a punishment. For Amelia Rothschild, it meant humiliation splashed across the dining table of a mansion. Her father, Jonathan Rothschild, wasn't just wealthy. He was a man who believed success was measured in numbers, reports, and results. The empire he built stretched across hotels, skyscrapers, and shopping complexes. His life was precision, calculation, and discipline. And to him, Amelia's grades weren't just poor performance, they were a stain on the family name. At dinner that evening, under the golden chandelier, her father's words hit sharper than the silver cutlery on their plates. "Every tutor, every chance, and you still fail. Do you even understand what it means to be my daughter?" Her mother, elegant but weary, tried to soften the blow. "Jonathan, she's trying." "Trying," he cut her off. "The world doesn't reward trying, it rewards winning. She will inherit billions, but at this rate, she'll squander it all." Amelia's fork trembled. She wanted to scream that she wasn't stupid, that she wanted to make him proud, but the words never came. Instead, she carried her shame silently up to her room, where walls covered in gold leaf and velvet curtains mocked her. A palace couldn't comfort a broken spirit. At school, it was no better. Her classmates whispered that she bought her way into Crestwood. Teachers treated her like a hopeless case. Tutors came in sleek cars, billed thousands for their time, and always left shaking their heads. "She doesn't listen," they'd say. "She doesn't care." But Amelia cared deeply, maybe too much. Pressure crushed her every time she opened a book. And yet in the corners of Crestwood Academy, unnoticed by almost everyone, was Elijah Carter, the janitor. He moved with quiet purpose, greeting students with a nod, humming softly as he worked. Most passed him by without so much as a glance. To Amelia, he was background, until the night she found him in the estate hallway. The next morning she spotted him again at school, sweeping near the library. For the first time she looked at him, really looked. His uniform was faded, his shoes worn, but his eyes held something that none of her tutors ever did: patience. When their eyes met, he smiled and said, "Good morning, Miss Amelia." His voice was steady, unbothered by the world's rush. She almost walked past, but something inside stopped her. Maybe it was the sting of last night's shame, maybe it was the kindness in his tone. She turned back and whispered, "Mr. Carter, do you think I'm hopeless?" He leaned on his broom, thoughtful. Hopeless? No, lost maybe, but lost isn't forever. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not as a Rothschild, not as a failure, but as a human being. That was the beginning. Have you ever had someone unexpected, maybe not a teacher or parent, say something that changed the way you saw yourself? Share your story in the comments. It might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. A week later, Amelia sat in the library, her books spread open like heavy chains. Every page felt like an enemy. She tried to focus, but her father's words replayed in her mind, sharper than ever. The world doesn't reward trying, it rewards winning. She slammed the math book shut, fighting tears. That's when a voice from behind startled her. "Numbers don't hate you, Amelia. You're just speaking the wrong language with them." She turned. Elijah Carter, the janitor, stood there holding his mop bucket. She blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" He placed the mop aside and sat across from her, uninvited but strangely welcome. "Math, history, even science, they're all stories, not facts to memorize. Stories to understand. Nobody ever told you that, did they? Amelia stared, suspicious. You think you know more than the tutors my father hires? Elijah chuckled softly. Tutors are paid to teach the subject. I'm here to teach you how to learn. Her cheeks flushed. She wanted to snap back, but the quiet confidence in his voice disarmed her. For years she had been drowning in the same methods, textbooks, drills, endless repetition. Yet here was a man who spoke of learning like it was alive, something human. He pulled out a scrap of paper from his pocket and scribbled a quick equation. Instead of handing it to her, he told a story. When I was your age, I worked with my father fixing old radios, circuits, wires, patterns. It was all about rhythm. Math is rhythm too. Listen to it, don't fight it. He showed her how the numbers formed a pattern, how it resembled the very hum of the machines he once repaired. For the first time in her life, Amelia's mind didn't shut down. Something clicked. Her eyes widened. Wait, that actually makes sense. Elijah leaned back, smiling. See, money can buy answers, but it can't buy understanding. That's something you earn by seeing the world differently. For the first time, Amelia felt a flicker of hope. Someone believed she wasn't broken. Someone thought she could learn. But in the world she lived in, hope was dangerous. Her father would never approve of her learning from a janitor. The other students would mock her mercilessly if they found out. And yet, Amelia knew she had just found her only chance to finally change. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, Elijah's words echoing in her mind. I'm here to teach you how to learn. It wasn't just a promise, it was a challenge. Do you think wisdom can come from the most unexpected people in life? Has someone you least expected ever taught you something unforgettable? Share your thoughts in the comments. You might inspire someone reading this. The next few weeks at Crestwood Academy felt different for Amelia. For the first time in her life, she wasn't drowning alone. Every afternoon when the library emptied and the chatter of students faded, Elijah Carter would appear with his mop bucket, sit across from her, and turn her failures into puzzles she could finally solve. He never explained with textbooks, he told stories. History wasn't just wars and dates, it was about people who faced choices, victories and defeats. Science wasn't a maze of formulas, it was the story of how fire was tamed, how light was captured, how life fought to survive. Even math became bearable when Elijah compared equations to dance steps, rhythm and music. Amelia laughed one day after correctly solving a problem she had always failed before. You make it sound so easy. Why hasn't anyone else taught me like this? Elijah wiped his hands on a rag and replied simply, because most people teach from the book. I teach from life. Money buys the book. Life gives you the lesson. Amelia didn't know it then, but those hours were reshaping her. Each day she left the library with her shoulders a little higher, her eyes a little brighter. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't hopeless. But secrets are fragile things. One afternoon, as Amelia leaned over her notebook, whispering through a tricky equation, she didn't notice the shadow at the door. Amelia, a sharp voice called. She looked up, startled. It was her father's assistant, Miss Jennings, the woman who tracked her grades like a hawk and reported everything to Jonathan Rothschild. Her eyes narrowed as they fell on Elijah sitting across from Amelia. What exactly is going on here? Jennings asked, suspicion dripping from every word. Amelia froze. Fear prickled down her spine. She knew what this looked like, the billionaire's daughter being tutored by a janitor. If her father found out, it would be over, not just for her lessons, but for Elijah's job. Elijah rose calmly, collecting his mop. Just keeping the young lady company while she studies, he said smoothly. His voice was steady, respectful, leaving no crack for judgment. But Amelia could see the flicker in Jennings' eyes. She wasn't convinced, and by tonight, her father would hear everything. That evening, Amelia's world felt smaller. At dinner, her father's words were as sharp as the silverware again. I hear you've been spending time with the janitor. Is that true? Her hands trembled. She wanted to defend Elijah, to explain how he was the only one who believed in her, but the weight of her father's stare silenced her. Jonathan Rothschild slammed his glass down. You embarrass this family enough with your failures. Now you're lowering yourself to this? I won't allow it. Amelia felt her throat tighten. For once she wanted to shout back, to tell him he was wrong. But the words never came. Instead she retreated upstairs, clutching her books against her chest like a shield. Yet even in that storm of disapproval, Elijah's words echoed inside her. Life gives you the lesson. If she wanted to prove her father wrong, she couldn't quit. She had to keep learning, even if the world was watching. If you were Amelia, would you defy your father and keep learning from Elijah? Or would you walk away to keep peace at home? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious how you'd handle it. A month later, Crestwood Academy buzzed with its biggest event of the semester, the Scholars Challenge, an academic competition where the brightest students competed in front of faculty, parents, and sponsors. For Amelia, it had always been the day she dreaded most. Every year she sat in the crowd while others shone. This time, her name was on the list. Her father had insisted, not out of faith but out of pressure, "You will stand on that stage. You will not humiliate me again," he had said, his voice like steel. Amelia wanted to refuse, but Elijah had looked her in the eye the night before and said, "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking through it. You're ready, Amelia. Trust yourself." On the day of the challenge, the auditorium brimmed with polished uniforms, clicking cameras, and whispers of excitement. Amelia's heart pounded as she stood among the contestants, her palms damp. The first question was math, the very subject that had tormented her. The moderator's voice rang out, "Solve for x, 2x plus 7, is 15. Amelia froze, her mind blanked. The laughter she imagined from her classmates roared in her ears. Then Elijah's voice echoed in her memory. "Numbers are rhythm. Listen." She inhaled, traced the pattern in her head, and whispered the answer, "X equals 4. Correct." All the audience stirred. Some clapped politely, surprised. Amelia blinked in disbelief. She had done it. The questions continued. History, literature, science. One by one Amelia answered. Not perfectly, but with a confidence she had never known. Each right answer was a victory. Each smile from Elijah in the back row a reminder she wasn't alone. But just as her spirit began to soar, the twist came. Halfway through the competition, her father stormed into the auditorium. He wasn't supposed to be there. Business meetings always came first. But here he was, sharp suit gleaming, eyes locked on her. He approached the stage, cutting through the audience like a blade. The moderator hesitated, the room falling silent. Jonathan Rothschild raised his voice so everyone could hear. "This farce ends now. My daughter has been sneaking around with the janitor. That's how she's been improving. Learning from a man who scrubs floors instead of scholars. Do you call this success?" Gasps filled the room. Amelia's face burned crimson. Students whispered, teachers exchanged glances, and Elijah sat frozen in the back row. Amelia's breath caught. In one moment her secret was exposed, her mentor humiliated, and her father's wrath laid bare before everyone. Her father's words sliced deeper. "If you continue with him, you are no daughter of mine." And in that silence, Amelia realized something shocking. The choice was no longer about grades. It was about her identity. Would she continue being the shadow of her father's expectations, or step into her own light, guided by the wisdom of the man the world dismissed? The stage lights flickered against her tearful eyes. She clenched her fists. For the first time Amelia felt a fire inside, not fear, but defiance. Teachers rushed to smooth over the scene. Students whispered in stunned excitement, and Amelia fled the stage before the final round was even called. Her heels echoed through the hallway as tears blurred her vision. She ducked into an empty classroom, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, the walls that usually held her silence now heard her sobs. She pressed her back to the cold chalkboard and whispered, "Why did I think I could ever change?" That night at home, her father didn't speak during dinner. His silence was louder than shouting. When the plates were cleared, he finally turned to her with a voice like ice. "You will stop this nonsense with the janitor. From tomorrow, I will hire a team of world-class tutors. You will obey. If you don't," he paused, letting the weight of his words hang heavy, "then you will no longer live under this roof." Silence was safer in that house. Amelia barely slept. The next morning at school, the whispers were crueler than ever. "Did you hear? The janitor's her tutor. No wonder. That's pathetic. She's desperate." She wanted to shrink into herself, to vanish. But the worst moment came when she saw Elijah outside by the maintenance shed. His calm face cracked with a sadness she had never seen before. "Carter," she said, her voice breaking, "I've ruined everything for you." He shook his head gently. "No, Amelia, you didn't ruin me. But you do have a choice now. You can let shame decide your life, or you can stand in it and grow stronger." She looked at him, tears burning. "But my father, he'll throw me out." "I can't," Elijah interrupted softly. "Your father owns buildings. He doesn't own you." But instead of lifting her, they pressed her deeper into conflict. Because even though she wanted to believe him, the truth was brutal. Amelia had never lived without her father's name, wealth, and protection. The thought of losing it terrified her. That week she stopped going to the library. She ignored Elijah's kind nods in the hallways. She retreated into silence, isolating herself once again. Her grades slipped back into chaos. The fire she had once felt dimmed to ashes. For the first time in her life, Amelia believed her father was right. Maybe she was hopeless after all. The following Saturday morning dawned grey and heavy. Rain drizzled down the windows of the Rothschild estate, turning the manicured lawns into puddles. Amelia sat cross-legged on her bed, books scattered around her like fallen soldiers. She hadn't opened them in days. She picked up a report card from her nightstand, every subject marked in bold red. She traced her finger across the word fail again and again, until the ink blurred beneath her tears. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "You will never be more than a disappointment." She curled the paper into a ball and threw it across the room. It landed near the doorway. Moments later, there was a soft knock. Her mother stepped in, her silk robe trailing behind her. "Amelia," she whispered, her eyes cautious. "Your father is leaving for a business trip. He'll be gone until Wednesday." Amelia barely nodded. Her mother hesitated, then crossed the room and picked up the crumpled report card. Her voice trembled. "I failed my classes too once." Amelia's head snapped up. "What?" Her mother smiled faintly. "You think I was perfect?" "No. I struggled, but I learned. And not from fancy tutors. From a neighbor who believed in me." She sat beside Amelia, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Sometimes the people who see us best are the ones the world ignores." Amelia stared at her mother, stunned. She had always thought her mother was just quiet, powerless in her father's shadow. But here she was, offering truth that Amelia had never heard before. Her mother pressed the report card back into her hand. "Don't waste your chance, Amelia. If someone is willing to guide you, hold on to that. Not for your father, for yourself." That night, Amelia lay awake replaying her mother's words. For the first time she saw Elijah differently, not as a last resort, but as the one person who had seen her when no one else did. The next morning, she made a choice. She skipped breakfast, grabbed her books, and hurried to Crestwood's campus even though it was Sunday. The halls were empty, except for the faint smell of polish. She found Elijah in the gym, mopping the floor in slow, steady strokes. He looked up, surprised. "Amelia?" Her chest rose and fell as she tried to catch her breath. "I can't do this alone," she said, voice shaking. "I almost gave up, but I don't want to. Please, will you keep teaching me?" Elijah set the mop aside, eyes soft with something almost fatherly. "I thought you'd never ask." From that day forward, Amelia committed herself to the lessons, but it wasn't just academics. Elijah taught her life. He showed her how to break problems into small steps, how failure was feedback, not final, how to breathe through pressure instead of letting it consume her. He told her stories of his own childhood, growing up in a poor neighborhood, working nights to finish school, failing over and over, until he learned how to stand back up. Amelia wrote his words down in a notebook, a secret diary of wisdom she carried everywhere. On the cover she scrawled, "Things money can't buy." And as days turned into weeks, something shifted. She began solving problems without fear. She asked questions instead of hiding. She even raised her hand in class, surprising her teachers. It wasn't perfect. She still stumbled, still made mistakes, but now she had resilience. And resilience, Elijah reminded her, was worth more than wealth. One evening, as they studied together in the library, Elijah leaned forward. "Amelia, one day your father will see numbers on a page, but I already see something greater. I see a young woman who refuses to quit." Tears stung Amelia's eyes, but this time they weren't from shame, they were from pride. For the first time in her life, she believed she was more than a Rothschild, more than a billionaire's daughter. She was Amelia, and she was learning how to stand. Spring arrived with blossoms across Crestwood's courtyard, but Amelia carried a storm inside her chest. The National Academic League had chosen Crestwood Academy to host the regional finals, a competition far greater than the Scholars' Challenge she had once fled. The entire city's elite would attend. Her name appeared on the roster again. This time she didn't flinch. When Amelia told Elijah, he studied her carefully. "This isn't about proving your father wrong anymore. It's about proving to yourself that you can stand on your own 2 feet. She nodded. She understood. The night before the event, Jonathan Rothschild returned home early from a business trip. As Amelia sat at the dining table with her notes, he loomed over her like a judge. "I hear you're competing again," he said, voice dripping with skepticism. "Yes," Amelia answered, steady but soft. He sneered. "Don't embarrass this family again. If you fail tomorrow, Amelia, you are no longer my daughter." The words hit her like a knife, but this time they didn't pierce as deeply. She remembered Elijah's voice. "Your father owns buildings. He doesn't own you." She paused, breathed, and remembered Elijah's lessons, stories, rhythm, small steps. Her classmates, once mocking, now sat stunned. Teachers leaned forward in disbelief. For every correct answer, a ripple of applause spread through the crowd. By the second round, Amelia had become the unexpected star. Even rival schools couldn't hide their surprise. Then came the final question. The moderator's voice rang out. "In literature, the theme of resilience often defines the hero. In your own words, what does resilience mean?" Silence fell. All eyes turned to Amelia. Her father, seated in the front row, folded his arms, waiting to watch her falter. Elijah stood in the back, his gaze steady, willing her to rise. Amelia closed her eyes. For a moment, the weight of her entire life pressed against her. Then she opened them and spoke, her voice clear. "Resilience is not never failing, it's failing and standing up again. It's realizing that money, power, or privilege can't protect you from struggle, but strength, courage, and humility can carry you through it. Resilience is learning from the people the world overlooks, and discovering that sometimes the greatest lessons come from those who ask for nothing in return." The auditorium erupted in applause. Teachers stood, students clapped. Even the judges exchanged impressed glances. Amelia's father's face hardened, but beneath his cold expression, a flicker of something shifted, doubt. Elijah, at the back, lowered his head with quiet pride. The moderator smiled. A perfect answer. That day, Amelia Rothschild, once the laughingstock of Crestwood Academy, became its most unexpected champion. When the competition ended, Amelia didn't rush off stage this time. She stood tall as her classmates swarmed around her, some offering congratulations, others staring in disbelief. For once, she wasn't the billionaire's daughter who failed everything. She was Amelia, the girl who had faced failure and refused to stay down. Her father pushed through the crowd. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. "You embarrassed me with your foolishness," he muttered under his breath. Then, after a long pause, his voice cracked just slightly. "But today, you proved me wrong." It wasn't an embrace, it wasn't forgiveness. But for Jonathan Rothschild, it was the closest thing to recognition Amelia had ever received. Her mother's eyes shimmered with tears as she wrapped Amelia in a quiet hug. "I knew you could." And in the corner of the auditorium, Elijah Carter simply gave her a small nod. No applause, no grand speech, just the silent pride of a man who had given her a gift that money could never buy. Later that night, Amelia sat by her window, pen in hand, writing in her secret notebook. Resilience, courage, lessons money can't buy. She smiled. For the first time in her life, the future didn't scare her. It called to her. Amelia's journey reminds us that sometimes the greatest wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in the wisdom shared by unexpected teachers. True success isn't being born rich. It's learning to rise when the world expects you to fall. What do you think resilience means? Have you ever learned a life-changing lesson from someone the world overlooks? Share your story in the comments. Your words might give someone else the courage they need today. If you enjoyed this story, wait until you hear the next one. Everyone laughed at the janitor, until the billionaire's will named him the heir. A tale of secrets, greed, and the shocking twist of who inherits everything. Make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the bell, so you never miss another sweet emotional story here on Billionaire Heart Stories. We bring you tales of romance, resilience, family, and life-changing lessons. Stories that remind you that sometimes the things money can't buy are the things that matter most. Thank you for watching.